Hello everyone. Today's training is functional communication training. I'm Stephanie Kaiser. I'm a family partnership consultant.
And my name is Jen Owens, and I'm the other family partnership consultant.
And in short, our role at Bridgeway is to help bridge the gap between services being provided for students at school and then those strategies that can be used in the home and community settings as well. So we'll go ahead and get started.
These are the fun slides.
As I adjust them. Okay, so what is functional communication training? Functional communication training, or FCT, is an evidence-based treatment approach that teaches individuals to communicate for a reason or a function. It's used to teach communication often as an alternative for disruptive or interfering behaviors. So, an example of this, of a disruptive or interfering behavior, might include screaming, hitting, throwing items. An example of an alternative behavior might be requesting with words, use of a device, using sign, or also exchanging a card. So to kind of emphasize this point, what we sometimes see as a failure to behave properly is actually a failure to communicate properly. Or to put it simply, FCT provides learners with a more appropriate way to express their wants and needs. So you may be asking yourself, can I use FCT with my child? The answer is yes. Research has shown FCT to be effective with a range of learners with ASD, regardless of cognitive level and or expressive communication ability. So it doesn't matter whether your child can, communicate vocally or what mode they use, but FCT is something that can be used across all learners. So why do we use FCT? Individuals with ASD often exhibit limitations in communication skills. Instead, they may engage in maladaptive behaviors such as self-injury, tantrum behavior, it could be throwing or yelling, in an attempt to let others know what they want. So chances are we've all seen this at some point or another. Those behaviors, those actions are a way to communicate with others. Functional communication training allows children the opportunity to more appropriately express those wants and needs. Research has shown that by providing children with appropriate ways to express how they feel or what they want, other interfering behaviors will decrease. And providing individuals with appropriate ways to communicate decreases frustration for both the student and instructors, and also parents and caregivers.
So now that we know about the why for FCT, we're going to break it down. The F stands for function, and we want to ask ourselves, what is that function? The first step in using FCT is to determine that function or that purpose, the reason that the interfering behavior, such as screaming, tantruming, dropping to the floor, is occurring. Considering a behavior's function is one of the basic principles of ABA. And if any of you attended our Intro to ABA training in the fall, some of this may sound a little bit familiar. To determine the function, we ask ourselves, what's that purpose? So the function, purpose, those are exchangeable. Is that behavior serving? Before we delve into breaking it down a little bit more, we are going to watch a short video on the functions of behavior. that wasn't too loud for everyone.
I'm sorry, I didn't know how to turn it down.
And it was going really fast too, but we'll go into a lot of the specifics next. So there are 4 functions of behavior. Tangible is to gain access to an item, activity, or food. So that behavior occurs to get the tangible item. Automatic or self-stimulatory is for situations where the behavior happens when the child is alone. It feels good, there's some sort of internal sensation, no one else has to be around for this function to be occurring. Attention is to gain attention from somebody else, and then escape or avoidance is to get out of something, delay something, get away from someone, and that is escape or avoidance. So another way to think about those 4 functions is thinking of the acronym SEAT and using that as a quick reference. So to help determine the function, we use ABC analysis, or what we also refer to as the 3-term contingency, thinking about the A, the B, and the C. The A stands for antecedent, or what happens right before the behavior. It's that trigger. In the video, there were several questions to consider. What was the activity that was going on? What was the instruction that was provided? That would be the antecedent. The B is the behavior, and that's something that we can observe and is measurable. So hitting, screaming, dropping to the floor, those are observable behaviors. Consequence is what happens directly after the behavior. It's often our response or the response of the environment that shapes and continues that behavior for happening again. Breaking it down, with those functions, tangible, we're going to practice putting it into this ABC. Again, the ABC is how we help determine what that function or the purpose that those interfering behaviors are occurring. The antecedent, Carl is walking with his mom through the checkout line at the grocery store and he sees candy. The behavior that's observable, he screams, "I want candy." The consequence is that he gets the candy, his mom gives it to him. The possible function or that purpose is him screaming to get something. He screams, he gets the candy. Next is attention. The antecedent, Carl's mom is on the phone. The behavior, Carl begins screaming and dropping to the floor. The response or the consequence, Carl's mom hangs up and asks him what he needs. It's very likely that in this instance, Carl's screaming and dropping to the floor gets him his mom's attention. It's effective, it's the way that he's communicating that he wants that attention. Next is escape and avoidance. Carl is sitting with his family at the dinner table. He swipes his food off the table and yells. His parents tell him to go to his room. If he wants to not stay at dinner, he doesn't want to eat that food, he doesn't want to sit at the table any longer, and then the swiping his food and yelling is a very effective way for him to communicate, "I want to get to escape this situation." And then the 4th one is automatic or self-stimulatory, sensory is another way to call it. An antecedent is often unknown because there are several times that we can't observe it. It just might feel good, there's an internal sensation. The behavior, for example, is a child flapping their hands or running back and forth. The consequence is some form of internal reinforcement or that sensation, and the purpose is that self-stimulatory, or it's meeting a sensory need. Because communication exchange is something that involves 2 people, where there's a listener and a responder, behaviors that serve the automatic function are not considered a communication attempt. So from here on out, we'll just be focusing on the other 3.
And it will be important to you to remember that the behaviors might look the same, but that's why determining the function is so important, because what could be a self-stimulatory or automatic behavior for one child could be a way for another child to get attention. They might look the same. If that makes sense. to review, the functions for which FCT will serve as an effective replacement include access to tangible, attention, and then escape or avoidance. And by understanding the function of behavior, we can teach children a more appropriate way to communicate so that the same outcome is received. So rather than hitting my brother to get the iPad, we'll work on teaching me to ask in some way to get the iPad. More appropriate, serves the same function. So, example 1, without an intervention, is Carl again. He's working on homework at the table. The behavior is that he crumples his homework sheet and throws it on the ground and yells. The consequence is that Carl's mom says, okay, go take a break. What's the function there? He's escaped and avoided having to do his homework. Another example, including a functional communication replacement, is that Carl is working on his homework at the table. Oops, for you guys to see. The behavior might be that he walks over to his mom and hands her a card that says break. The consequence is the same. Mom tells Carl, okay, great, go take a break. The function is also the same. Carl has appropriately been able to escape and avoid having to do his homework. So everything else is the same, but the behavior has been shaped. In the example, the use of a break card replaced the child's disruptive behavior. Again, both the card and the disruptive behavior served the same function, which was avoiding his homework, taking a break. Sounds great, but how do I get started using FCT with my child at home? The steps to implementation include 1, you want to identify the communicative behavior that you want to change. So what's the either maladaptive, interfering, less appropriate behavior that you want to shape or change. 2, you want to assess the function of the behavior. So basically this means you want to observe with intention. You want to observe your child. When are they using that behavior? What's the consequence? What is the reinforcing factor? What's the function of that behavior?
And that's where the ABC comes in. And everyone should have received an ABC chart, and that's something to use for identifying what that function is.
It looks like this. And then step 3, you'll identify a replacement behavior. Step 4, you're going to teach the replacement skill. And then step 5 is you want to fade out any prompts that you've been using to teach that skill. So the ultimate goal is independence. So this is just the definition of communication by B.F. Skinner. Any act by which one person gives to or receives from another person information about that person's needs, desires, perceptions, knowledge, or affective states. Communication may be intentional or unintentional. It may involve conventional or unconventional signals, may take linguistic or non-linguistic forms, and may occur through spoken or other modes. So, to put what he said simply, communication is an exchange between 2 or more people to express needs, feelings, or ideas. Some examples of communicative behavior that we might see, and again, it can be, there's so many different, I don't even know the word I'm looking for right now. There's many, many different. These are just some examples that we might see. Pointing, tapping, yelling, hitting, pressing letters on the device, pressing words on the device, making vocalizations, use of words, any behavior that functions to gain access, to escape or avoid, or for attention. So, this is a pretty extensive list of examples and non-examples. I'm just going to read a couple. So, some examples of communication behavior include the child crying when told no. The child takes their mom's hand and leads her to the cookie jar. While at a baseball game with parents, the child repeats home on his AAC device. He might be trying to get away from that baseball game. Or maybe the child pushes their brother when he takes the iPad. Some non-communication examples include when playing by herself, the child is talking about My Little Pony. Although she's talking, the communication partner is not present. While riding his bike, the child is singing. Or when sitting by herself, the child is signing the letters in the alphabet.
take it a little bit further, step 1 is to identify that interfering behavior. So considering how your child is inappropriately communicating their wants and needs to you. Hitting, yelling, falling to the floor, engaging in self-injurious behavior, a combination of all of those or additional ones. Those might stand out a little bit more. However, it could also be a little bit more subtle, such as grunting, reaching for things, leading, pointing, going over to something and just standing there could also be considered communication. Some specific examples. When told it's time to clean up his toys, Tommy throws his toys and drops to the floor. So that's the A, the antecedent, it's time to clean up. The communication interfering behavior is that he's throwing his toys and dropping. Another example is when presented with a challenging homework task, Betsy begins hitting the side of her head with her hand. And then a third, when entering the kitchen, Dan grabs his mom's hands, pulls her towards the fridge, and points. So once the interfering behavior is identified and we know what we want to change, the second step is to assess the function. Tools that can be used to assess the function or purpose of the interfering behavior are the ABC analysis, ABC chart that you guys have, and then a function wheel that we'll be talking about in a little bit. But considering what's that function? Tangible, attention, escape, or avoidance. Just a quick review of the ABC analysis. The antecedent is what happens before that behavior, that trigger. The B is the behavior that's observable and measurable. Sometimes it's helpful to have somebody else work on that definition with you to make sure you're seeing the same thing. The consequence is what happens directly after that behavior or that response. And then this analysis helps to pinpoint what may trigger and what keeps that behavior going and happening again. We're going to practice again. This time we are just going to give you the A, B, and C and see if anyone wants to identify what the possible function is. So the antecedent is that Sally is doing homework with her mom. The behavior is that Sally begins screaming and dropping to the floor. Consequence, Sally's mom tells her they can work on homework later. Possible function. Avoidance or escape. Yep. David sees his iPad in the front seat. David kicks his mom's seat. Mom hands him the iPad. Access to tangible. David sees his teacher talking to a peer. He hits his peer. David's teacher tells him to stop.
Attention.
Very good. Next we will talk about the function wheel. This is a useful tool. Hopefully you all have one. We can get it out and look at it together. A useful tool to help determine why that behavior or that purpose, why the behavior is occurring by looking at the one side says what was your child experiencing, and then the other side says how did you respond. So both sides have all 4 functions, it's just from a different perspective. So the questions, we'll take a look on the child side, the orange tangible. The behavior occurred when the child was denied a preferred item or something was taken away. So in the situation, the behavior might be screaming. You're realizing screaming is occurring when a favorite stuffed animal was taken away. This little clear part in the middle circle would show that the function or the reason for that screaming behavior is likely tangible. Flipping it to the other side, how did you respond? This just puts it into a different perspective. We'll use the orange tangible again. When the behavior occurs, you as the parent calms your child by giving them a preferred activity or item. So if when you provide that item, the behavior stops, that maladaptive behavior, it could be, the function could be serving as a tangible access to the tangible.
Nice little tool if the behavior is occurring and you find yourself standing there saying, why? Like, why is this happening? A quick tool to use. You don't have time to write down that ABC.
Right.
Just to say, okay, what is my child experiencing and how did I respond?
Moving on again, we'll do another practice. The Anna scene is that Carl is sitting with his family at the dinner table and his dad told him to take a bite of Brussels sprouts. Gross. Carl swipes his food off the table and yells. Carl's parents tell him to go to his room.
Escape.
Likely it's escape, yep. So thinking about it in terms of these questions and how to answer it, what is the behavior that is observable and measurable?
Yelling, throwing food off the
Yeah. Throwing the food off the table and yelling. What was the child experiencing? And that's what this function wheel asks. What's the child experiencing?
So just in this given scenario, if you're Carl, what is Carl experiencing at this moment?
He doesn't want to eat Brussels sprouts.
Mm-hmm.
Escape.
Yeah, what else in his environment? What's he hearing? His dad's telling him, you gotta eat your Brussels sprouts. So he's hearing something he doesn't want to hear.
Okay,
Yeah. He's hearing that demand.
And then how did the parent respond? Yep, that consequence. So looking at the function wheel, under the escape, which is the green one, when the behavior occurs, parent allows child to leave the activity or gives them a break from that demand. So he's allowed to leave the activity of eating those Brussels sprouts. And you guys have already answered, the function is escape.
So step 3 is to identify a replacement behavior. So what would you rather have your child do? The replacement behavior should, again, serve the same function as the interfering behavior. It should be efficient, meaning that it can be taught in a short amount of time, and it allows your child to quickly access what they desire. So examples could include their parents' attention, escape from a task, etc. This is really important. It should be within your child's skill set. So remembering that when teaching functional communication, the goal is communication and that it's functional and efficient, and separating that from teaching a new skill. So I think oftentimes it can be really tempting to be focusing on teaching that skill and reach outside of your child's skill set. You want to make sure that you're focusing on those skills that they already have within their repertoire. So for example, it would not be expected that a nonverbal or non-vocal child be taught to use a full sentence to request parent attention. They would likely be taught within whatever mode of communication is most effective currently for them. So maybe it's a picture symbol, maybe it's a sign, maybe it's use of their device. You want to choose a replacement behavior with the same function. So taking a look at our example with Carl, again, the antecedent is that he was sitting with his family at the dinner table. His dad placed that demand. He said, you need to eat Brussels sprouts. The behavior is that Carl swipes his food at the table and yells. That's the behavior that his parents want to change. The consequence is that his parents tell him to go to his room, and we said the possible function is escape. So the goal will be to choose a replacement skill that also allows Carl to escape, but is more appropriate than swiping his food and yelling. So, some possible replacement skills for escape or avoidant behavior, escape or avoidance maintained behavior, include teaching a child to say, break please, provide a written prompt for the child to read that says break, so maybe they need that visual cue to say break if they can read. Teaching a child to sign break, so maybe they're not able to tell you break vocally. You can teach the child to hand you a card or even touch a card that says break. Maybe it's stationary on the wall. Maybe it's a card that they can, take to you and hand into your hand. Or you can teach them to request break on their AAC device. Whatever your child's current skill set is, that's where you want to start. So these are just some examples. There's Carl. His mom models. She has, has to teach him what the expected behavior is first. It's not just going to appear. So she says, you can tell me break, please. And Carl says, break, please. Hopefully on the first try, right? That's super realistic. There's just an example of signing break. These are examples of break cards, so using some of those visual cues. A lot of our students have break cards on their desks at school. And that's something that you can use too, like at the homework table at home. This is an example of requesting break on a device. And then thinking ahead to attention. So let's say the maladaptive behavior or less appropriate behavior serves an attention function. Some replacement skills include teaching the child to verbally say, I want mom or dad, or whoever the attention that they're seeking is from. Teach the child to request mom, dad, etc. on their device. You guys seeing a pattern? Teach the child to request appropriate forms of attention. So some examples include, let's say the child just runs up and bear hugs without any indication. Not totally inappropriate, but not as appropriate as it could be, right? So you might want to shape that behavior by teaching them to verbally say, I want a hug. Or handing you a picture that says tickles or high five, so specifying what kind of attention they want so that it's clear to their communication partner. Or also requesting chalk on the AAC device. So these are just some examples. That might be what a visual cue looks like for a hug. There's another example with Carl. Mom is telling him, you can say mom. So she's giving him that model first because he's not going to know. Although maybe we know that it is within his skill set to respond to her model. So she knows, okay, if I say mom before him, he's going to be able to imitate me. And then Carl says mom.
And it might be something too where you break it down a little bit further. For this hug example, if you know that every time the screaming and the dropping results in you picking up your child and giving him a hug, but requesting hug might be too much, even just starting with requesting up by putting hands up, which leads to your attention, could be something to start with as well.
So some examples of replacement skills for attention. Did I just read through all these and not have them on the slide? Nope. Sorry, lost my place. Here we are. Some replacement skills for access to tangible include teaching a child to use I want language. You can provide a written prompt for the child to request an item. This might just say I want with a blank space for them to fill it in. You can teach the child to sign for the item. Use of a choice board to assist the child with asking for an item. So we'll see some examples in a minute of a choice board, but that could be with written word, that could be with pictures. They can be general pictures, they could be real pictures. Again, whichever you think your child would respond best to. And a lot of the time it is trial and error. So trying out a couple different types of communication modes before you find the right one. You can teach them to request on their AAC device. And these are just some examples. So you might have an I want snap that looks like that, that's blank with a place for a picture. You might have one with a line where you can write it in. Maybe it's just a little laminated strip that you can take with you in your purse to use across settings. Or you might have a board that has a bunch of pictures on it that your child can then take and see and pick one off.
And this goes along with that observing with intention piece too. We're observing what are those items that your child might be requesting, so you can start generating a list of them to then find the pictures to match.
This is just another example. Maybe we'll put the picture on there of what they want. If they, they may not have the motor skills to take that picture off and put it on, you can also just make a board that they can touch the picture on there. And then step 4 is teaching the skill. So you want to teach the replacement skill in the same environment as the interfering behavior occurs. So let's say the child is inappropriately asking for your attention in the home setting. You want to teach that skill, the replacement skill in the home setting so that it isn't confusing to the child. And then eventually we'll talk about generalization, which is where you want to kind of gradually teach them across different environments. For example, if the child is screaming in the this is another example, if they're screaming in the candy aisle, you want to teach them to use the I want visual while in the candy aisle. If you taught it at home, it could be beneficial, but where it's going to be the most effective is when you're in that store in the candy aisle, when the behavior is actually occurring. It's important as well to not reinforce the interfering behavior. For example, when teaching a child to request using I want, using that I want visual in the candy aisle, you don't want to say stop screaming or no candy if you keep screaming. I know this can be really tempting sometimes, but what you want to do is put that behavior on extinction and then reinforce the appropriate behavior. So this is just an example of, again, modeling. You want to model or show your child what that desired behavior looks like when first teaching the skill. It's important to prompt immediately and frequently. So again, when you're first teaching that more functional communication mode, the child won't know the expectation. They've previously been reinforced by or for the less appropriate behavior. So it's going to be a change for them. So another, again, Carl's mom models what that looks like for him. If he is requesting just using a gesture, she would say, you know, you can tell me that you want me and model what that gesture looks like. After a couple tries, or more than a couple tries, the eventual goal is that Carl responds. It's important to note as well that as you start teaching that, again, you will probably see Carl try to engage in those behaviors that previously got him access to what he wanted. So you don't want to attend to those, continue just modeling what you want to see.
And you can set this up so that there are several opportunities in a row. Like if he is requesting mom by being picked up, model it, encourage him, prompt him, pick him up, and then give him a hug or two, put him back down, let's try it again. And you can do that several times. Or requesting I want with specific items. Snack time is a great time to do it. If your child likes goldfish, you could have 10 goldfish, give 2, have your child request a goldfish or 2 so that you're giving your child 10 times to practice that saying and prompting within a short period of time.
This is just Carl's mom showing him how to hand her the card, another example. And then step 5 is you want to fade prompting. So you prompted consistently, your child is demonstrating the behavior you want to see with those prompts. Then you want to fade out your prompts and see can they do it more independently. So as the child begins responding, you're going to fade or gradually decrease the amount of prompts that you're giving. This allows the opportunity for the child to independently demonstrate the skill. So some examples of prompt fading might include, if your child is using a card to request an item, you may, you may begin with hand-over-hand prompting for use of the AAC device. So let's say you're asking, or you're showing your child how to request break on their AAC device. You may have to start by showing them, hey, you can ask me break, and bringing their hand to that icon. But then as they are able to do that with your hand on theirs, you might just nudge their elbow. Okay, you can ask me for a break, and see if they can find it on their own. But the eventual goal being that when it's time to ask for a break, they have learned, okay, I can go to my device and press break on my own without that prompt. Another example is that instead of modeling an entire phrase, you may just model part of the phrase. So instead of saying, you can tell me I want ball, and saying that whole phrase, you might just say, you can tell me I, or I want, or even taking it a step further, I want with the first sound of the word. And then you want to decrease the amount of verbal prompts you provide. So if you're using a visual, let's say you're teaching that I want strip, you might start by using the I want strip and also saying it verbally. You can tell me I want ball. maybe then taking out that verbal, just holding up the I want strip and seeing if that child, with just seeing the visual cue, can then generate I want ball.
So to wrap it up, some general guidelines to review. Before implementing functional communication training, it's important to determine the behavior's function or the purpose, the why that it's happening. When selecting a replacement behavior, it should, 1, match the function of the interfering behavior, so it's the same outcome. 2, be efficient. You want your child to be able to quickly access what it is they want, whether it's the attention, the tangible item, or to escape, and also be within your child's current skill set. Then when teaching the new skill, it's important to remember not to reinforce that interfering behavior and really focus on heavily reinforcing the behavior that you want to see, that new skill, and then use prompt fading to increase your child's independence. That wraps up our FCT.